Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. Our guest today is Jens Stoltenberg. He's NATO's Secretary General and he joins us from Brussels. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Last week, Ukraine struck military targets deep inside Russian territories. We're also hearing that the US is more inclined to give Kiev longer range weapons. So a very simple question, are you afraid that this is escalating right now? The war in Ukraine could become a broader war.
NATO and NATO allies have two main tasks when it comes to the war in Ukraine. One is to support Ukraine, and we are delivering unprecedented support to Ukraine. The other task is to prevent escalation of the war beyond Ukraine. And we do that partly by making clear that we are not party to the conflict. We don't have NATO troops on the ground, we don't have NATO planes in the air over Ukraine, but we are supporting Ukraine in the right to defend themselves, a right of self-defense which is enshrined in the UN Charter. We're also preventing escalation beyond Ukraine by increasing our presence in the eastern part of the alliance. We have more NATO troops, we have more ships, planes in the eastern part of the alliance now than any time since the Cold War. To send a clear message to Moscow that an attack on one ally will trigger a response from the whole alliance. And we do that not to provoke a conflict, but to prevent the conflict, to preserve peace. So we are very focused on preventing escalation of the war.
Right, but we know the Russian president has said supplying long-range missiles would be crossing a line. Are you in favor of providing Ukraine such long-range weapons? Ukraine has been demanding it, and it seems Washington is now thinking about this. Are you in favor of such a move?
First of all, we have already provided a lot of advanced weapons, including HIMARS, which are long-range precision weapons. And we have also provided other types of advanced weapon systems to Ukraine. There is a constant assessment of what more types of systems that need to be provided to Ukraine. But let me also say that I think that we should not only focus on new systems. We should also focus on making sure that the systems that are already there are functioning, are working as they should, meaning that we need to ensure a constant flow of ammunition, spare parts, and maintenance of existing systems, artillery pieces, howitzers, CSRs, HIMARS. We also have armored vehicles, we have air defense systems. All of these systems which are already in Ukraine have to work as they should, and that requires a lot of supplies of ammunition, spare parts, and maintenance.
Right, but you don't rule out delivering those weapons we just discussed.
Well, as I said, we have already delivered, for instance, HIMARS, but I will not go into specific systems. That is a dialogue which is constantly going on between NATO allies, partners, and of course with Ukraine.
Vladimir Putin said the danger of a nuclear war was growing. Do you agree with him?
We have made it very clear to President Putin, to Moscow, that any use of nuclear weapons in Ukraine will have severe consequences for Russia, dramatic consequences for Russia, that the nuclear war cannot be won and should never be fought. And we are monitoring very closely what Russia is doing. So far, we haven't seen any changes in their nuclear posture that require any changes from our side. But we continue to be vigilant to monitor closely what Russia does. The likelihood of any use of nuclear weapons in Ukraine by Russia remains still low, but the potential consequences are so big. So the risk is something we have to take seriously, and that's exactly what the NATO allies are doing. Also by saying that President Putin's nuclear rhetoric, his references to the potential use of nuclear weapons, is by itself reckless and dangerous.
Right. The French President Emmanuel Macron said recently that Western countries needed to provide security guarantees to Russia the day it comes back to the negotiating table. And he said one of the essential points we must address is the fear that NATO comes right to the doors of Russia. This created a furious reaction in Eastern Europe, in Ukraine. Do you agree with the French president that such security guarantees will need to be given to Russia, or that is not the time to talk about this?
The most immediate and important task now is to support Ukraine to ensure that they are able to prevail and survive as a sovereign, independent, democratic nation in Ukraine, in Europe. Then I believe that at some stage also this war will end at the negotiating table. But what we do know is that what happens around that negotiating table is fundamentally linked to, inextricably linked to the situation on the battlefield. So if we want Ukraine to survive, to remain a sovereign, independent, democratic nation in Europe, we must support Ukraine. That's the best way to achieve a lasting peace by ensuring that Ukraine is strong so they can achieve an acceptable solution at the negotiating table. It has to be Ukraine that decides when the time is right and what are the acceptable conditions for a peace agreement. And also President Macron stated clearly that has to be Ukraine that decides the moment and the conditions for a peace agreement.
Are you concerned that the Russian strategy of pounding Ukraine's energy infrastructure is actually working?
It's a brutal form of warfare. It's a way to weaponize winter, to deprive civilians, the Ukrainian people, of water, of light, of heating, as we now see winter has come. And it's a brutal form of warfare because it's aimed at millions of civilians. At the same time, I'm absolutely confident that the Ukrainians will not bend, that they will continue to stand up for their country, for their freedom, for the protection of their right to exist as a sovereign nation in Europe.
Right. I want to get to the issue of Sweden and Finland. Secretary of State, U.S. Secretary of State Tony Blinken said last week that he was confident that it would soon enter NATO. We know there is a holdup by Turkey, especially Turkey demanding the extradition by those two countries of people allegedly tied to the PKK or the followers of the exiled preacher Fethullah Gulen. Are you also optimistic that this will be solved very soon?
I'm confident that all allies, including Turkey and Hungary, which are the two allies that have so far not ratified the accession protocols, will do so. I will not speculate about exactly when, but I'm confident that will happen. Not least because we have to remember that the important decision was taken when all NATO leaders met in Madrid at the NATO summit in June this year. All NATO leaders, including Turkey, then decided to invite Finland and Sweden to become NATO allies. All 30 NATO allies also signed the accession protocols, and so far 28 out of 30 allies have already ratified those accession protocols in the national parliaments. So far, this has been one of the quickest accession processes in the history of NATO. We have to remember that Finland and Sweden applied in May, and in June we already invited them and signed the accession protocols. Let me also add that Finland and Sweden are in a totally different place now than before they applied. We have more NATO presence in the region. We have bilateral security assurances from the United States, France, Germany, UK, and others. We have Finland and Sweden as invitees, as we say, because they have signed the accession protocol. So they participate in NATO's military, civilian activities, cooperation meetings. So it is inconceivable that if there were any attack or pressure from Russia on Finland and Sweden, that NATO will not react. Right. So we have come a long way. I'm certain that we will also have the ratification of two last allies, but we are in a very different place now than before Finland and Sweden applied.
So you expect this to happen within weeks?
Again, I will not speculate about the timing, but I'm saying that we have made important decisions. It was an historic decision for all allies to invite Finland and Sweden. All allies have signed accession protocols, and Finland and Sweden are already participating in NATO's civilian and military activities.
Just as a last question, tensions are flaring in Kosovo. Kosovo's prime minister urged NATO peacekeeping troops to intervene, while the Serbian president said he would ask NATO to let Serbia deploy military and police in Kosovo. How concerned are you about the latest flare-up in Kosovo?
NATO is very focused on Kosovo, the Western Balkans. We have a long history there. We helped to end the two ethnic wars in Bosnia and Herzegovina, then later on in Kosovo, Serbia. And of course, we still have our presence. The NATO KFOR force, close to 4,000 personnel, plays a key role in stabilizing the situation. Our forces are capable, they are ready, they are vigilant, they are following the situation very closely. NATO and the European Union are working closely together. And my message to all parties concerned is to refrain from escalatory rhetoric, from provocative rhetoric and actions, and then to help to reduce tensions in Kosovo.
Jens Stoltenberg, I want to thank you very much for appearing here on the France 24 interview, and thank you all for watching it.